Good morning, people. Today I'm gonna brag about some strategy and politics and tactics and dynamics. That may seem to be to you that are way above my head, but that's fine. Please excuse my rant. All I'm trying to say here is, although I have very good confidence that people upstairs in Europe know what they're talking about and see what's going on. However, the lower ranks seem to be in the dark about what's going on. And don't go about reading difficult and complex strategy books and dynamics and tactics and war and maneuvering and so on and so forth. What I'm trying to say is I'm hoping that lower ranks and normal people see what I'm talking about here. What's going on is very simple. It's really not very difficult to decipher and discern and connect the dots and draw a map of the theater now. It is extremely different from the last century. I'm going to give you an example. When Fuchs, the French general, at end of World War I, said he observed with singular accuracy. They say with singular accuracy. Now, he didn't know why, but sometimes we have these premonitions that basically each and every one of us who is a little bit enlightened or much enlightened, they are clairvoyant, they sense things, and even in maths, they call them conjectures, right? They can't prove them, but they know they're correct. And in that case, what they do is stay them, and eventually down the road or later generations, they get resolved, and then people benefit a lot from that math and so on. So I'm trying to say something here that I'm sure the leaders know what it is, but I'm going to emphasize on it. I'm going to make it public nonetheless. What's going on now? So that general said with supposedly singular accuracy, that World War I, after the peace was made, or a ceasefire was made in World War I, he said, this is an armistice. And sure enough, 20 years later, World War II happened. But what people fail to understand is the very same establishment that caused World War I to happen was actually, World War I was a preparation for World War II. And people thought this is it, and Germany went into poverty and so on. And eventually World War II happened, and the most single thing that really that made me put me in a shock and flabbergasted and so on. It's not that I was living back then, but it was the Kaiser who lived in Holland, in exile in Holland, and his family basically lost power in Germany. And all that, by the way, is relevant to what happened in Russia before it, the Communist Revolution and the World War I and the Ottomans' dissolution, and so on. These are interrelated. They're not unrelated. Most certainly fall in the same category, and they're interconnected. They're not independent of each other. They do seem to be independent, but they're not really. And there's a coherent operation, comprehensive, coherent operation that has been in the work for a long time, and it was taking place. So now people approached World War II oblivious to what's going on, and sure enough, it happens. And that's when it hit me, is that the Kaiser, who lived in Holland at that time, sent a letter to Hitler congratulating him on the victories, right? Initial victories, right? To me, that was like mind-boggling to how this man, who was the Kaiser of Germany and so on, was happy about the very same people that dislodged him and did what they did to Germany. And sure enough, everyone with a sense of investigative abilities and being able to observe history and so on can clearly see what was going on in World War II. Now, people think when things happened in World War II that apparently, the Cold War started, but the Cold War subsided and so on. And, they were fine. As soon as we humans have this mentality of, once hardship and calamitous weather or calamitous events of the social upheaval or something, they subside and go away, we think this is it. Can't be farther from the truth. And I'm gonna second Fuchs or Fouch's, that French general who was an ally of Germany. World War II was an armistice. And eventually we saw a lot of wars too. We saw Vietnam and we saw the Middle East and we saw here and there and so on and so forth, but the very same process or the very same instigators of things are not finished. And what's happening now is this, very simply put. I can go through the details, but I'm of Arab descent, like mixed race, but Arab descent, and that's what I consider myself. And the language has something called the disconnecting or discounting of the extraneous. Extraneous meaningly, in order for you to make somebody understand so and so and so and so, you have to go through a lot of details. But Arabic provides facilities for shortening that by discounting certain details. Hence, by which are originally from Arabic, these concepts are from Arabic. Borrowing, metaphoring, implied, and so on and so forth. By the time the sentence is finished, you will understand what it is and know, like instead of having to narrate and speak of all the details. Right now, what's going on, and like I said, World War I, World War II, and prior to that, the establishment of Zionism and the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire, or the Ottoman Caliphate for that matter, and the political things that happened in the Middle East, divisions, and it was like a century of upheaval, and all that really appeared, started the modern age, started all these upheaval. The events, these events, calamitous or otherwise, even in China, last century, so the Chinese Revolution, and that's also linked and interrelated with what happened in the Middle East and Europe and some parts of Africa and even South America and the United States for that matter. So on a lighter scale. So what's going on now is very simple. There are three regimes, main regimes in the world. One is the Chinese regime, one is the Iran regime, and one is the Russian regime. And these are the tripods of a state called Israel, which appears to be small and something similar to neutral to the events in the world or outside of the theater of conflicts and so on. No, that's where management and it has always been going on like this. However, in 1948, it was made as a center of Zion. Let's put it this way. Like you needed an office space. Now you have a lot of business, right? You go IPO on the stock market, and now you really have to have like big business, right? I mean, offices to accommodate for your private records and management and so on. So that's all there was to Israel, modern day Israel, which was established in 1948. Is simply that. It's an office. It's a center for privacy where it's not subject to laws or searches or revolutions or so on and so forth. That's what it is. I think politicians know that in the West or in Asia or those top politicians. Now, those three tripods are followed by smaller ones. There are like lower ones, such as the regime in India or Syria or Turkey, for that matter, Turkey. But the main tripod, which is the regime in Shanghai, originally from Shanghai, really, that's where the revolution came about, and Moscow and Tehran, or Qom for that matter. That's where Ayatollah Khomeini was born, and it is the historic birthplace of the founder of the Assassins movement. That is for Israel, that is the future. And remember, I don't have to provide much evidence for you. And along those smaller regimes that are dominant here and there are smaller satellites still, and these carry out operations, cleanup operations or garbage collection, they call them sometimes, like in the mafia and drug wars and so on, like Hezbollah, like Muslim Brotherhoods, like ISIS, like Al-Qaeda, many other things like Sandinistas in South America, or other things, other organizations that do, in fact, immerse themselves and participate actively in the tactics in the work that is taking place. This is a fact. Don't go read complex books about strategies and political divisions and spontaneous or circumstances that lead to things. There are no circumstances right now since the last century to circumstances have been made. Now, but that's something we know, but let's look at where they're looking to move into. Obviously, what happened in the world last century was the century of slaughter. Some people put I myself put at the number of slaughtered innocent civilians in order to shore up a despotic rule, communist rule across the world. Some 500 million people were killed. That's my number. Some people put it at less than that. No, I doubt it, actually. I think it's closer to 500 million. If I am in a mood of compromising, I will say maybe it's 200 million, But guess what? That's no small number to kill of innocent. The admitted number in Europe in World War World War II is 60 million, 60 million. Guess what? That's no small number, and that's conservative number. Now, how do I know that, for example? I know that because the Soviet Union admitted to losing 60,000 or so around Berlin in World War II. Later on, during the Gorbachev era, they admitted to losing nearly 500,000 soldiers around Berlin. So as you can see, the numbers are manipulated and they're never real, whether it is statistics or vital records such as Census Bureau and so on. They always manipulate numbers. The number of Sunni Muslims in the world is always underestimated intentionally. So you can't trust anything that you see. But where they're going with that, they're going like last century. This century is a continuation of last century, and the strategies have changed. The approach and the handling and the dealing with the situations and so on has changed. So I don't know if there's any World War III in the sense of military conflict and hot wars and fights like on large scale and so on. I don't think so, because right now, as you can see, there is far more stable establishment than it used to be in the last century. But it's something else. One of its two things I can remind you with is the coronavirus, which I consider a hoax, right? That put people in their home. To the theft of the financial systems in the world right now. As you can see, people are suffering hardship and financial woes and so on, while stock markets are rising. Stock markets are rising because of establishments like in White House, say for example, and Congress and Senate and so on, issue daily decrees on adding debt on the nation, and they forward that to the stock market. Some of the big investors actually during the Trump era, the Trump years, at one point, he issued some 10 trillion perhaps in one day and forwarded that to the stock market, to the investors. And he bragged about it, saying, I like massive, right? You know who I'm talking about. TJ has got 3 names. The middle one is T, like two-door, and so on. Anyways, not that there's that money in the world that people have anymore. And those who own the investment firms and stocks and stock markets and so on are not even 20%, probably less than that, maybe 10 to 15% at the most. Same thing in Europe, same thing everywhere else. However, so the idea for I'm going to be brief about Chinese regime. Chinese regime is meant to dominate Asia. And as you can see, they try to move into India and Taiwan, and before that they started harassing Japan, but they realized it was going to be some deadly fight and tough fight that may be detrimental to their regime. Now they talk about 1.3 billion, doesn't matter in military sense, and you guys know that, those military people know that. In Iran, it's very obvious. America and Europe intervened on their behalf to remove the Sunni rule in Iraq and bring them about. Sure, they brag a lot about, like America and Iraq and so on, but every Iraqi Shiites, right? And they brought the Shiites in power, which are actually the pawns of the Iran regime, which is really made in the 1979 as a revolution. It was created by Israel, but by proxy, like US and France and Russia and, here and there. And that's meant to dominate the Middle East. Now they tell you, for example, that Iraq started the war with Iran. That's not true. That's not true at all, actually. Iran, I was young and I was back home when it started in Syria. And I still remember the caricatures and so on, the happy, trigger-happy Iranians beginning to threaten the Gulf countries and the Middle East and so on, that they're coming. I still remember seeing a caricature in the newspaper where Ayatollah, after he took over, he had like his turban like in his hand, raising it, and he's trying to use it as a trap, to trap 3 or 4 different people, and who were very small Arabs, right? One of them was King Fahd. He wanted to trap them like this, that he's coming. That's even before the war with Iraq. And I don't need to go into details for that. Again, reason being is, the reasons. For about a year, they kept harassing Iraq and intruding on their space and activating the Shia base in Iraq to destabilize and subvert the government. And, you all know that, but Iraq didn't start that war. They say Iraq started using gases. No, Iraq started using gas, but Iran used gas too, actually. There is a Kurdish village where 600 innocent people were killed by gases, and they said it was Iraq. And I recall the British intelligence discovered after analysis that it was Iranian gas, that gas the Kurds. So now let's go back to Russia. Russia now is meant for Europe. Now you may say, well, that's too far-fetched. No. Last century is my witness. And Europe is not out of the woods after World War II. You may think you learned your lesson, that you're not going to have Nazism, that you're not going to do so and so. No. That march, which started in 17 plus by Theodore Herzl, didn't stop and will not stop until totalitarianism has basically blanketed and covered the earth, and because that's a religious mission, if you will. So the future of Europe, if you recall, the Soviet Union and America was free, partially free, during that time. They were in Germany, and they included the Baltic states and so on. They really, if you consider Europe all the way to Moscow, not counting Siberia, the Soviets, the commies, and the two brothers, creative brothers, Stalin and Lenin, and thereafter, it was under their rule. Much of Europe, whether it's Eastern Europe or Baltics or even half Germany, and they were backing on other places like Italy, and so on, and Spain, and so don't take that as when the Soviet Union collapsed in Afghanistan. You guys should thank Afghanistan for that, but hey, it was revived again by you, the very same enemy that is threatening your very existence, your very same value, your societies which existed for thousands of years and which are developed. They're threatened by that, by those Putins and their grandfathers, the Stalins and Lenins and so on, back then, and they're still threatened now. And when they met their demise in Afghanistan, you guys revived them. That's what it is, basic and simple. And the future of Europe is very dark. They move very slow, by the way. But now here's the point I'm trying to make. If you have a responsibility toward your people, If you really like your people, you as a German, you as a Scandinavian, you as a European, you as Italian, you as whoever you are, Polish, if you value the future of your people, of your nation, of your country, of your continent, of your values, of your everything that you are, that you have been for thousands of years, that is now threatened. And if you allow Ukraine to fall, something else is next. That communist, that evil, sinister, dark entity that took over in 1917 or before in Moscow, that basically turned things over, is not gone. If you're French and you value your French society and whatever that you inherited or came down the line of your heritage and so on, that's threatened now. Right now, it is threatened. Notice how China is approaching the Asian theater, or what it's doing, its behavior. Same thing Iran, Iran's regime. Same thing as Russia. The reason you're not being alarmed is because they're moving very slow. But believe me, you will eventually forget because you're not reacting. You will forget, and then your next generation will have to deal with it again. If the next generation is or not already under that particular hegemony of dark, sinister movement that was that came from the East. That's what it is. There is nothing else. The other point I want to make is my other evidences. Look at the United States. United States is being gutted after, of course, the murder of John Kennedy and his brother Robert Kennedy. That was when the US government was decapitated by Israel, right? And ever since, the presidents are Israelis. And then it was eventually being converted slowly but surely, judicial system, anything that you think of, into an Israeli protectorate or dominated country. I sometimes now at this juncture, I call the United States as the whore of Israel, So that said, you Europeans, and people in particular, you need to tell your politicians and leaders and rulers, legitimate or otherwise, so United States is being gutted as we speak, and that has been accelerating for the past 10, 20 years or more than that probably. And the goodness and value and wealth and everything that United States was, and the West in particular, Germany as well, has been transferred to China, has been transferred to Iran, has been transferred to Russia, period. Trump participated in that. Nixon participated in that. Obama participated in that. And now Biden and Bush, and they all participated in that. The transfer, the United States has, if you want to consider it a cow, has been already dismembered and being given to those regimes to rise. Nothing in those regimes, whether it is the regime of China or the regime of Iran or the regime of Russia, has invented anything. If you look at what they have, it's all taken from the West, period. Whether it is United States or England or Germany, everything is taken from here. No money paid, no security clearance. We all know what Snowden did. And there are a few like him, Snowden actually caused a lot of damage to the United States. He took a lot of secrets and gave it to China and Russia and Iran, that tripod of Israel. Straightforward. They didn't, the damage was acknowledged to be extremely big. But there was few, and the last one I know of, who caused a lot of direct damage. And now Obama did transfer to Iran. He gave him stealth technology, or those the technology for the drones. Actually, it was him. George Bush gave a lot of electronics to China because one airplane, a spy airplane, landed in Hong Kong or somewhere, and the Chinese people came and seized it and took everything from it, and they just left. And then in the back door, they already had the tools and means to read what's inside that spy airplane. During the time of Obama, supposedly a drone, like a certain drone, fell in Iran and didn't even crash. It's just like it's landed. and they took it. And in Syria, when some of those Tomahawk missiles supposedly was fired at Syria by Trump, Russia declared and gloated about it that they picked up those drones, and they're going to modify their own. Sure enough, if you look now, they have like very identical drones, those Predator drones flying about, and Tomahawk missiles and so on. But the most damaging, really, to the United States, the most damaging leaks to the United States is in Helsinki. When Trump met with Putin in Helsinki in a private room, he passed to him information that could have never been passed by anything else. He literally, that Trump literally emptied the United States and gave it to Russia. And from there, it'll spread to Iran and China as well. That's the tripod of Israel. So no, the designs of Zion and Putin's, for that matter, is not over and out. After World War II ended, people emerged from their hideouts. Those who were left in Germany, for example, they thought it's over. No, it's not over. Germany, as you know it, for 3,000 years or 4 or 5, Leo Arminius and so on. Is very little left of it, is being gutted socially and economically and technologically and ethically, and values, heritage, all being destroyed systematically after World War II. So now here's the deal. There is a next stage coming soon. It's very obvious because there's activities going on, and as if the brew is now bubbling, right? You could see it. There is a lot of activities going on in Asia and the Middle East and in Russia and in Europe, for that matter, and America. You know, like all these signs are indicative. You know, they have a confluence of you know, they all converge on one thing alone. Is that like something else big is going to happen? And in Europe, my expectation, if Putin's take over Ukraine and European countries do not fight Russia on the Ukrainian borders, they will fight on their own later in time. That's guaranteed. Now, the next step, just like World War II and what happened after it, is exponential. Has an exponential destruction than World War I. What you're gonna see that is further has further exponential destruction over to the European countries, the Western European countries, period. You're gonna see that. There will be no mercy. The German after World War II and now is no longer the German that was between World War I and World War II, or before that. The German of the future, or the French of the future, or the Spanish of the future, or whoever it is in the future, that Western Europe. There will be exponential damage to them as well. They will not even recognize themselves as German, perhaps, or as French, or as Italians, or as Baltic, or as... My point, case in point to you, is signs are very easy to read. You know, you don't have to go read a difficult book about strategies and you know, all these books that you buy. I bought a book, I remember, for 25 cents from a certain store by Abba Eban. I think it was in the 80s. It's called The New Diplomacy. He talks about detente and so on. The 25 cents. I have never wasted so 25 cents. That was in the that was in the 80s, right? Or 90s? Yeah, early 90s, probably 80s. I don't know. I went to a store and there was like, they were selling books like for 25 cents, and well, that was one of them. So I grabbed the whole thing, you know, like. And then I still remember the cashier complained to me like, "You're buying all the books." And she called the manager and he looked, he says, "What?" She says, "Oh, he's buying now." I said, "Go ahead, take the money." So she took the money, and that was one of them. I wish I could return that book and get my 25 cents back. I threw it in the trash anyway, but I have never seen someone speak so gibberish intentionally, just to probably make some money or anything like that, knowing very well what's happening in the world. But nonetheless, Europe, wake up. If you don't find those Putins, and I always say S because plurals, in fact, I had information that that this fuck Putin is dead already, or by way of cancerous intestinal cancer or something of the sort. I don't know what it is, but and chances of him being dead is 99%. Don't worry about Photoshop and fake videos and so on and so forth. Oh, Photoshop and voice synthesis. That's right now. Oh, it's so deceiving. Even prophets would fall victims to it. No, anyways, that said, or occult leader, or people, and initiate and enlighten people. So what I'm trying to say here is very simple. What John Kennedy said, clear and present danger, in his speech to the guild of to the newspaper guild, when he said something about clear and present danger and the secrecy, speech of secrecy. You all know that, and that's about to happen now. I don't know how soon, but it is pretty close to being to happening. So you Europeans either fight those Putins on the Ukraine borders, or you'll fight them on your own later in time. And once they're over your throats, in your bed while you're slumbering in profusion and wealth and drugs and alcohol and foods and nice houses and so on, these fucks are crawling on under your bed, and they will come up and they basically will slaughter you. So if you don't care about that, disregard what I just said. If you do, then if there's a time now to respond, this is it. Your whole entire future as European nations that existed for thousands of years is threatened now, and the threat is real. I watched a movie. Go ahead and watch it. It's not a fake movie. It happened before. Well, I mean, it's fictional, a little bit fictional. It's 13th Warrior by Banderas, right? And they show you those people who come and they dress like bears, right? And they're Mongols, like they got like Mongoloid features. Go see it. That movie is talking about the threat from the east, not anywhere else. Threat from, go see that movie. They're talking about the Mongoloids coming across again in the future. They did in the past, and you should thank the Muslims for defeating them in the spring of Goliath in the Middle East, like 800 years ago. They're coming, and that's what it is. So now I want you to listen to this speech, and you may think it's irrelevant, but JFK, rest in peace, he and his brother, while speaking the truth, and he only scratched the surface of what's going on. That conspiracy he's talking about is as real as it gets. Listen to it.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate very much your generous invitation to be here tonight. You bear heavy responsibilities these days, and the article I read some time ago reminded me of how particularly heavily the burdens of present-day events bear upon your profession. You may remember that in 1851, New York Herald Tribune, under the sponsorship and publishing of Horace Greeley, employed as its London correspondent an obscure journalist by the name of Karl Marx. We are told that foreign correspondent Marx, stone broke, and with a family ill and undernourished, constantly appealed to Greeley and managing editor Charles Dana for an increase in his munificent salary of $5 per installment, a salary which he and Ingalls ungratefully labeled as the lousiest petty bourgeois cheating. But when all financial appeals were refused, Marx looked around for other means of livelihood.
Bourgeois, remember the mottos of the Soviet communist? That's courage. If you don't believe in those biblical stories about scourges and darkness that falls on the earth and so on. There you go. The communism is right in front of you. Let's go back to JFK. Rest in peace.
And fame, eventually terminating his relationship with the Tribune and devoting his talent full-time to the cause that would bequeath to the world the seeds of Leninism, Stalinism, revolution, and the Cold War. If only this capitalistic New York newspaper.
A note here. What happened in the Soviet Union when the two Creed brothers, Stalin and Lenin, took over, right? And they turned over. Happened in the United States when they killed John Kennedy and his brother. And afterwards, just like after Lenin, just like after John Kennedy, every president belongs to the entity that killed that man, John Kennedy. And in the Soviet Union, every leader after Lenin belongs to the same establishment and foundation, school of thought as Lenin did. It's no different. Why would they speak about other religions and so on? Simply because they want you, when mass killing happens, they want you to blame it on the wrong entity. Back again. He's smart. Not smart enough.
Treated him more
Rest in
kindly.
peace.
If only Marx had remained a foreign correspondent, history might have been different. And I hope all publishers will bear this lesson in mind the next time they receive a poverty-stricken appeal from a small increase in the expense account from an obscure newspaper man.
Dear JFK, I am going to answer that. In some hands, there's no small amount or big amount. They're effective amounts. In some hands, like mine, money goes away. I basically don't think accumulating too much money is a good thing.
I have selected as the title of my remarks tonight, The President and the Press. Some may suggest that this would be more naturally worded, the President versus the press, but those are not my sentiments tonight. It is true, however, that when a well-known diplomat from another country demanded recently that our State Department repudiate certain newspaper attacks on his colleague, it was unnecessary for us to reply that this administration was not responsible for the press. For the press had already made it clear that it was not responsible for this administration.
Smart guy, not deep. Although he sensed what's wrong with this world, he couldn't get the information or knowledge enough.
Tonight is not to deliver the usual assault on the so-called one-party press. On the contrary, in recent months, I have rarely heard any complaints about political bias in the press, except from a few Republicans. Nor is it my purpose tonight to discuss or defend the televising of presidential press conferences. I think it is highly beneficial to have some 20 million Americans regularly sit in on these conferences to observe, if I may say so, the incisive, the intelligent, and the courteous qualities displayed by your Washington correspondents.
He's exaggerating here a little bit, meaningly mocking people while being serious.
Nor, finally, are these remarks intended to examine the proper degree of privacy which the press should allow to any president and his family. If, in the last few months, your White House reporters and photographers have been attending church services with regularity, that has surely done them no harm.
Notice, this is called the implied mocker.
On the other hand, I realize that your staff and wire service photographers may be complaining that they do not enjoy the same green privileges, the local golf courses, which they once did. It is true that my predecessor did not object, as I do, to pictures of one's golfing skill in action, but neither, on the other hand, did he ever be a Secret Service man.
Golfing. You know golfing, right? Those Shriners and Masonics and so on, they go golf. Why do they golf? Because that's a place where nobody can hear them, and it's wide open. So if anybody is spying, they can see them right there. That's where they exchange secrets and so on and so forth. I don't know if those guys are relevant anymore, to be honest with you.
My topic tonight is a more sober one.
There you go.
Of concern
Main
to
point.
publishers as well as editors.
Main point.
Talk about our common responsibilities in the face of a common danger. The events of recent weeks may have helped to illuminate that challenge for some, but the dimensions of its threat have loomed large on the horizon for many years. Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy.
People, do not let your leaders take entire responsibility for resisting this onslaught that is coming through under darkness and unseen. Because they may be able to, they may actually take heed of John Kennedy and what happened to him. But if the masses talk and the masses resist, nobody can assassinate or kill everybody in the country. Nobody can. But if they come over you, you will wish you resisted, because they're going to make you live like animals. You know the Soviet Union, you know Syria, you know Iran, you know other places, Cuba. Cuba is absolutely connected in that picture as a dot in that picture of last century. Absolutely. You can take these words to the bank for they're as good as gold, and that's how true they are. Back to his speech.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions.
Closed society. This closed society, you don't understand this closed society. They don't take converts. They don't mix blood-wise. They don't mix with others. Except the fathers. Sometimes they choose fathers, not mothers. I do believe you know what I'm talking about, but it's not the only one. So we'll continue with his point. He's only scratching the surface.
Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. But I do ask, every publisher, every editor, and every newsman in the nation to re-examine his own standards and to recognize the nature of our country's peril. In time of war, the government and the press have customarily joined in an effort based largely on self-discipline to prevent unauthorized disclosures to the enemy. In times of clear and present danger, the courts have held that even the privileged rights of the First Amendment must yield to the public's need for national security. Today, no war has been declared, and however fierce the struggle may be, it may never be declared in the traditional fashion. Our way of life is under attack.
It may never be declared in the traditional fashion. The dark clouds are looming to your east of Ukraine, and it's not declared in the traditional fashion. They seem to be playing around or maneuvering or threatening, no, not NATO security, blah, blah. No. All that is for you to distract you and confuse you from what's really going on. I'm not exaggerating. Since this man said what he said in that speech, you know what happened, right?
Those who make themselves our enemy are advancing around the globe. The survival of our friends is in danger. And yet no war has been declared. No borders have been crossed by marching troops. No missiles have been fired. If the press is awaiting a declaration of war before it imposes the self-discipline of combat conditions, then I can only say that no war ever posed a greater threat to our security. If you are awaiting a finding of clear and present danger, then I can only say that the danger has never been more clear, and its presence has never been more imminent. It requires a change in outlook, a change in tactics, a change in missions by the government, by the people, by every businessman or labor leader, and by every newspaper. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. It conducts the Cold War, in short, with a wartime discipline no democracy would ever hope or wish to match. Nevertheless, every democracy recognizes the necessary restraints of national security. And the question...
So now I'm going to stop the speech. I'm going to put it in the notes below so you can listen to it later. Fact of the matter is, if I was a European citizen now, or whatever citizen, Middle Eastern citizen, I would volunteer. If the government of France or Germany or Scandinavia, or if you really love your country as a citizen, you would volunteer into Ukraine now. Because if you don't want to volunteer or stop these minutes from coming through, right? Not that they're brave. JFK said that they come at night and declared and so on, not because this is a tactic these tactics are successful. Well, they're successful, but because they're not brave, so to speak. Now, there is a clear and present danger. He coined that term. JFK coined that term. But then later, Tom Clancy wrote a book, fiction, called it Clear and Present Danger. All right? Using that very same term. He derived from that term, or using the same term. And he diverted your attention from the real danger into something called Muslim terrorism, right? Who's made by the very same establishment that made Nazism, that made communism, that made the PutinS and the Castros and so on, and killed JFK himself. Make no mistake about that. People, your future is threatened as we speak. And your future is so gloomy and looks so out of humanity. And if there is a time for you to believe in conspiracy and the 1948 and the Brave New World, this is it. This is it. The man here was scratching only the surface. He saw this semi-visible, inconspicuous monster, deadly creature from hell, crawling and moving slowly ever since toward the west. He saw that. That's what he's talking about. Now you may say he's a conspiracy theorist. No, he has information. He was in a place that qualified him and enabled him to see the circumstances and intelligence system that he was able to reference that sees what he sees. That's what I'm talking about here. Case in point is, this is for Europe. This is a decisive and crucial time. You either fight those who come from the east, or you don't. And what I'm about to say is this: go watch that movie, The 13th Warrior. The 13th Warrior. It's a fictional movie, but it's real. Visit the Mongols. History, and whom Winston Churchill described in that 6-volume books as, I think, that 6-volume books that he published before he died. Well, it was written for him. He called them like the mechanical savagery, which dawned later by the communists, and not just that. Even if you survive the onslaught and the slaughter, like what happened in Baghdad or elsewhere, these guys are gonna make you live like animalize you. If you thought these people, Huxley or Eric Arthur Blair, were writing a fiction for money, you're wrong. They can see what he saw. Only he has information to prove that. You cannot leave Ukraine alone. Because next thing, the fight is going to happen on Poland's border and on the other borders that go west through to Germany, right? And to France and to... Make no mistake about what's happening. And people, you should rise up against your leaders being lethargic and oblivious to what's happening in Ukraine and around Ukraine. As much as you're active about the vaccine, they're no different. You should coax or coerce your leaders into going against that Soviet Union. Basic and simple. I have really nothing else to say. And like they say, you may take this as, far-flung ideas and so on. No. Those who talked about stuff like this before World War II, they were mocked and they were ridiculed, possibly. And those who ridiculed them may not be alive anymore. You may think that you're conforming to the new world, and I have one thing to say about that. When Lenin and Stalin took over, many of those whom they killed were the very same people who carried the revolution, who shouldered the revolution on their shoulder. Typical. Just like Hitler and his SS killed the stormtroopers, just like in Iran, he murdered all these leaders and hundreds of thousands of them in the first year alone. After that, Khomeini returned to Iran and then brought a new entity. He used them to reach the power, seat of power, and control the state. And then he murdered, slaughtered them afterwards. Same thing happened in Iran, same thing happened in Cuba, same thing happened in Germany, same thing happened in Russia, same thing happened in Syria, everywhere else, in China. You know, I keep forgetting China. China is, I read or heard that when the communist revolution occurred in China, they murdered no less than 100 million people. I heard from a Chinese man who is a regime man actually here in the United States that they stopped education for 13 years until those old ideas went away from their mind. One last thing, all those people, many of them who were murdered in the last century were Masonics. So there is no protection for you if you believe in good and evil, or if you're a Muslim, or if you're a Christian, or if you're Catholic or Protestant for that matter. You can conform to the very same set of dogma or belief as they dictated to you, and you think you're doing fine, obeying the law, that hidden law. Now, that doesn't matter. That's a ploy, that's a method, that's a road to arrive at certain end. Ends justify means. I wish for those European citizens and their leaders to wake up. If you love your country and time to sacrifice, this is it. On individual basis, go volunteer in Ukraine. You get people who volunteer against those supposedly Syrian Muslims, and they go join like forces that supposedly fights against ISIS. They're not fighting against ISIS, they're fighting against the population. ISIS is symbolic. ISIS is an entity created by the modern establishment to really make sure that those Syrian people don't become free or break free from the yoke that they're suffering under, similar to the gulags of the Soviet Union and so on. Have a nice day. I wish you luck and I wish you wake up. Goodbye, my friends.